hook to capture curiosity. They say the ocean never forgets. Its waves whisper secrets of the past, carrying the cries of the lost, the screams of the forsaken. The USS Indianapolis was doomed to sink into history, its tragedy buried beneath the waves. But what if the horror didn't end with its sinking? What if something far more terrifying lurked beneath those dark waters? Something that never let go. July 30th, 1945. The night was eerily silent, the sea stretching endlessly under the pale moonlight. The USS Indianapolis had just completed its top-secret mission, delivering the atomic bomb components that would end World War II. The crew, exhausted but relieved, believed they were heading home. Young seaman Charlie Evans leaned against the railing, staring into the vast emptiness of the ocean, thinking about his mother's apple pie and his little sister's laughter. He had promised to take her to the county fair once he returned. He smiled at the thought. He didn't know that in a few minutes, he would be fighting for his life in a nightmare beyond imagination. Then, without warning, a deafening explosion tore through the hull. The ship lurched violently, throwing men overboard as flames erupted into the sky. Screams echoed as a second explosion followed, splitting the ship's belly open. Water rushed in, swallowing everything in its path. Chaos erupted. Some were burned alive, others crushed by the collapsing steel. The USS Indianapolis groaned like a dying beast before she finally broke apart and slipped beneath the surface, dragging hundreds of souls into the abyss. Those who survived the sinking floated in the open sea, barely clinging to life. But the real horror had just begun. As Charlie gasped for breath, salt water burning his throat, a chilling sound sent a shiver down his spine. A splash, then another. The men screamed as shadows moved beneath them. The sharks had arrived. But what terrified Charlie more than the sharks was something else. Something unnatural. Something watching them from below. For 4 endless days, the survivors clung to each other, watching their friends disappear one by one. The sharks struck mercilessly, dragging men under as their blood turned the water red. But it wasn't just the sharks. Men whispered of shadows beneath the waves, dark figures with hollow eyes that didn't belong to the living. Some claimed they heard voices, soft, mournful cries calling their names. Others swore they felt icy hands brushing against their legs. Charlie held onto his best friend, James, who had been severely injured. "Stay with me," he whispered, tears mixing with the salt water. But James' eyes were filled with terror. "They're calling me, Charlie. I can see them. The dead. They're here." And then, as if pulled by invisible hands, James slipped from Charlie's grasp, sinking into the darkness. Charlie screamed, reaching out, but it was too late. His best friend was gone. And deep below, something moved, something ancient and hungry. By the third night, Charlie was delirious. His lips were cracked, his skin burned by the sun. His mind swam between reality and madness. Then, through the haze, he saw it, a figure walking on the water. At first, he thought it was another hallucination. But then, the figure turned, and Charlie's heart nearly stopped. It was Captain McVeigh, the very man who had gone down with the ship. His uniform was soaked, his eyes hollow and lifeless. The other survivors saw it too. "That's impossible," one man whispered, but the figure raised a skeletal hand, pointing towards them. And then, in a voice that sent ice through their veins, it spoke. "You should not be here." Suddenly, the water around them began to bubble, as if something massive was rising from below. The sea churned violently, and then, without warning, one of the men was yanked under, his screams cut short. The surviving men stared in horror as the water turned black, thick like ink. A massive shadow loomed beneath them, something too large to be a shark. Something was waking up beneath the waves. Charlie's breath came in ragged gasps. The captain's ghost was still there, watching. And then, in a whisper that sent chills through every man's soul, McVeigh said, "It's coming." Charlie turned, just in time to see a massive, rotting hand emerge from the depths. To be continued. The ocean holds many secrets, some buried in history, others waiting in the abyss. The men of the USS Indianapolis thought they were fighting time, hunger, and sharks. But there was something else beneath those waters, something ancient and monstrous, something that did not belong to this world. And now it was awake. Charlie's body trembled as he clutched the remains of a life vest. His lips were cracked, his throat parched beyond pain. The ocean stretched endlessly, swallowing the last light of day. Around him, only a handful of men remained, their faces gaunt, their eyes sunken with exhaustion and despair. They had seen too much, suffered too long, and now, just as hope seemed within reach, something far worse had come for them. James was gone. He had been Charlie's closest friend, and now he was nothing but a memory sinking into the black abyss. Charlie's vision blurred as he forced himself to stay awake. If he let go now, he feared he would never wake up again. The water trembled. A low, guttural sound vibrated through the ocean, so deep it rattled their bones. The few remaining survivors froze. Something was beneath them, something massive. Then, without warning, the sea erupted. A man named Reynolds was the first to go. 1 second, he was there, gripping a piece of floating wreckage. The next, he was gone, yanked downward so fast his scream was swallowed by the waves. More splashes followed. Men were being pulled under, not by sharks, not by any creature they had ever known. Charlie barely had time to react before a shape loomed beneath him. A shadow vast and unnatural. The water was thick, black and oily, like it had been tainted by something old and dead. Something brushed against his leg. Not a fin, not a tentacle. Something worse. Something cold, slick, and pulsing with unnatural life. A hand. Charlie screamed as a rotting hand broke the surface and grabbed his arm. But it wasn't human. Its fingers were too long, its skin waterlogged and peeling, revealing muscle and bone beneath. The grip was ice cold, strong enough to crush bone. He thrashed, kicking desperately, but the hand tightened. And then, slowly, it began to pull him under.